Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving headfirst into something many of you might be dreaming about, especially, as the weather warms up, adding a swimming pool.
Yeah, a pool is fantastic, great for the family, adds value.
Absolutely. But let's be real, it's a massive project.
Yeah.
Way more complex than, say, buying a car or even doing a kitchen remodel.
Absolutely, and that's where the trouble often starts, rather.
Exactly. The biggest splash you might make early on is signing a contract you don't fully understand.
That is the core problem we really want to tackle today. It's so easy to get swept up in the excitement, picking tiles, imagining the parties, and you just sign the paper based on a price and maybe a good feeling about the builder.
A handshake deal for a six-figure project involving digging a massive hole in your yard. What could go wrong?
Exactly. Crusting instinct over the fine print on a pool project. That's often where things hit rocky bottom, unfortunately.
So we've been digging into a source specifically focused on pool contracts. And yeah, okay, reading any home improvement contract is important. We get that. But this guide really highlights why pools are kind of in their own league.
They really are. You've got major excavation, complex plumbing and electrical systems, specific safety regulations, fencing requirements, and yeah, a huge price tag. The stakes are just uniquely high compared to painting a room or even redoing a bathroom.
So our mission today really is to give you a shortcut, help you understand what actually matters in that stack of paper before you put pen to it.
Yeah, we want to help you spot the crucial details, know the right questions to ask, and basically protect that pretty significant investment from day one.
All right, so let's imagine you've met with a builder, maybe you have a quote, maybe even a full contract sitting in front of you. Based on what our source material says, what's the absolute non-negotiable first thing you have to get your head around?
Okay, the absolute first thing, the bedrock, really, that everything else relies on, is the scope of work.
Scope of work. Oh,
Think of it as the builder's exact promise. This is what we will do. And for a pool project, it needs to be incredibly detailed.
so like build pool on a line item isn't going to cut it.
Oh, not even close. That's basically useless.
Right. So what specific things need to be spelled out for something this complex?
Okay, so the scope needs to detail everything. The initial dig, the excavation details, what type of pool structure. Is it fiberglass, gunite, vinyl? Specify it. The decking around the pool, what material? Pavers, concrete, how many square feet?
Okay.
Any required fencing that needs to be in there to meet code, all the guts, the filtration system, any heater, the pump. And crucially, it has to match exactly what you discussed, the size, the depth, any special features like a spa, a waterfall, maybe retaining walls or patio work around it.
Wow. Okay. So detail is everything here.
Absolutely. Here's the key takeaway. If it's not explicitly listed in the scope of work section, you have to assume it is not included in the price.
Okay. And that's where those nasty surprises pop up later, right? You wanted the filter included
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Exactly. Or, fixing the lawn damage from the excavation wasn't part of the pool install. A vague scope is basically an open door for budget creep and disputes later.
Got it. Granular detail in the scope is absolutely king. So once you feel like, okay, I understand what they're promising to do, what's next in that document stack?
Okay, next up, zoom in on the materials section. This tells you the specifics of what they're using.
Right, the quality stuff.
Precisely. Are they listing the exact type and maybe even color of pavers? Or the mix for the concrete deck? What brand and model number for the filter, the pump, the heater? What kind of tile for the water line? Are there things called allowances mentioned? That often happens for finishes like tile or coping, where you might pick the exact one later. Knowing these specifics helps you compare quotes apples to apples and understand the quality you're paying for.
Okay, materials. Makes
Yeah.
sense. Then we get to the bit that always makes people nervous, the money, the payment schedule. Our source really hammered this point home for pools. Why is it so uniquely critical here?
It is incredibly critical because a pool build happens in distinct, expensive stages. You need to see exactly when deposits are due, and more importantly, what specific milestones trigger the next payment.
Milestones. Okay.
And here's a key insight from the source material we looked at. For pools, those milestones absolutely must be tied to tangible progress, things you can actually see.
Tangible progress? Like what? Not just week 4.
Exactly, not just time. Like, a payment is due upon completion of the excavation. Another when the pool shell or structure is actually installed in the ground. Another when the decking is fully formed or poured. And maybe the final big one only after the pool is filled, the equipment is running, and everything is commissioned.
Okay. So that stops the contractor asking for, like, 50% of the money before they've even dug the hole.
Precisely. It prevents them from front-loading the payments way ahead of the actual work being done. You want your payments to roughly track the value being added to your property.
That makes perfect sense. You want to see something substantial before you write another big check? What's the risk if you don't tie payments to progress like that?
Well, you leave yourself really vulnerable. Imagine you've paid 70% of the contract price, but the project stalls right after the shell goes in. You're in a terrible spot. You have very little leverage to get them back on track, and you're out a huge amount of money if things go south completely.
Yeah, I can see that.
The source definitely highlighted successful projects where homeowners were really strict about this. Payments only released when a major visible phase was truly done, like the shell being fully set or the entire deck being poured and finished.
Okay, scope, materials, tying payments to tangible progress, fundamentals. What else needs a close look in that contract?
You should definitely understand the cancellation policy and fees. Seems minor, but life happens. Plans change, finances change. What are the penalties or procedures if you need to back out or even just pause the project for a while? Better to know upfront.
Good point. And then there's a section that seems to trip up so many people, specifically with pools. Change orders. Why is this so critical for pool contracts?
Because you're digging. Unlike painting a room, you're dealing with the unknown underground. The classic pool example is hitting unexpected rock during excavation. That wasn't in the plan.
Right. That can add huge costs.
Exactly. So the contract must clearly spell out how changes are handled, whether it's due to unforeseen site conditions like rock, or because you decide you want a different tile, you want to add that fancy LED lighting mid-project. How are these changes documented? How are they priced? Is there a fee just for processing a change order?
Wow.
Our source mentions stories of, well, failure, where homeowners just glossed over this section, then they hit rock or wanted an upgrade, and suddenly faced massive disputed cost increases because the process wasn't defined in the contract they signed.
Ouch. Yeah, that sounds like a fast track from a dream pool to just a nightmare hole in the yard filled with arguments.
It really can be. So a clear written process for handling change orders is absolutely essential.
Okay, so what's the final piece of this contract puzzle we really need to understand?
The warranty information. This is your long-term protection. You need to know exactly what parts are covered. Is it the pool structure itself? For how long? What about the liner if it's a vinyl pool? The pump, the filter, the heater, any lights? Each component might have a different warranty period.
Different parts,
Yes.
different warranties.
Yes, and you need to know the conditions. What voids the warranty? The source actually warned about this as a potential advanced trap. For instance, maybe improperly draining the pool for winter could void the warranty on the structure itself or on certain equipment. It's not just if there's a warranty, but the specific details and exclusions.
Wow, okay, so it's not just a checkbox, but I got warranty. You need to understand the fine print there, too. All right, we walked through the key sections. Let's shift gears a bit to avoiding the common mistakes. What's the absolute number one most frequent error homeowners make that leads to headaches and unexpected costs?
It goes right back to that first point, actually. The most common mistake is not fully understanding or clarifying the scope of work and then making assumptions about what's included.
Okay, give us some classic examples. What do people assume is included in a pool contract that often isn't, unless it's explicitly listed?
Oh, the big ones we hear about. People assume basic landscaping restoration after the heavy equipment is gone. You know, putting some topsoil and seed down where the lawn got torn up, often not included unless specified. Or the specific safety fencing required by code around the pool area. They assume the pool price covers all required fencing. Not always.
Right.
And a huge one. Electrical work. They assume the quote covers all the necessary wiring for the pumps, filters, heaters, maybe underwater lights, maybe bonding. If it just says pool equipment hookup, that might not cover running new circuits from the panel, which can be expensive.
Okay, that's a perfect illustration. A vague scope just leaves gaps for things to fall into, and those gaps usually cost the homeowner more money.
Precisely. Those assumptions turn into costly change orders or entirely separate bills you weren't budgeting for.
So beyond the scope itself, what other missing clauses or, vagueness are red flags in the contract document?
Definitely watch out if there isn't a clear written change order policy, one that insists Changes must be in writing and signed by both parties. Verbal agreements for just adding a couple extra feet of decking can stack up and cause huge fights later about what was agreed and what it cost.
Right, get it in writing.
Absolutely. Also, be wary if the contract is fuzzy on late payment fees. You want to know what happens if there's a slight delay, but you also don't want excessively harsh penalties. Clarity is key.
Okay, so let's talk about gut feelings too. When you're reviewing a quote or a contract, what are some things that should just make you pause and think, something feels a bit off here? What are those red flags?
Yeah, there are definitely some signals. Vague descriptions in the scope, as we said. Install pool isn't enough. If it lacks dimensions, depth details, the type of finish, specific equipment brands, the type of decking, that's a major red flag. Payment terms heavily weighted upfront. If they're asking for, say, 50% or more before any significant work like excavation even starts, or before the pool shell is even delivered, be very cautious. Missing basic contractor info? Do they clearly list their license number? Proof of insurance? A physical business address, not just a P.O. box. If that's missing, that's unprofessional at best.
Good point.
And a big one for me, the lack of any clear timeline or schedule. Even a basic outline of construction phases, if they can't give you a rough sequence of events, it might suggest they don't really have a solid plan for managing the project.
Those are really concrete things anyone can look for. Now, what about people who've maybe done other big renovations? Maybe they feel pretty savvy. Are there any advanced level traps specific to pool projects that even they might miss?
Oh, absolutely. Even experienced homeowners can get tripped up by pool specifics. We already touched on the nuances in warranty language, like different coverage periods for the shell versus the pump, or specific actions voiding coverage. That's definitely an advanced trap.
Right, the fine print.
Yeah. Scope creep is another classic. Those small, seemingly innocent verbal agreements. Oh, while you're here, can you add an extra outlet? Or let's upgrade to the fancier waterline tile. If these aren't formally documented with costs via the change order process, they pile up and lead to major disputes over the final bill. Who authorized what for how much?
Yeah, the death by 1,000 cuts scenario.
Exactly. And a subtle one is misaligned expectations on details that weren't explicitly written down. A common one is the exact scope of post-construction cleanup. Does it just mean hauling away big debris, or does it mean pressure washing the new deck and cleaning the filter? Or who is responsible for scheduling and meeting with the various inspectors from the city or county? If it's not spelled out, assumptions lead to frustration.
It really sounds like the sheer complexity of a pool project just introduces way more potential points of friction if that contract isn't absolutely crystal clear on everything.
That's a perfect way to put it.
So what about the other end of the spectrum? The smaller pool jobs. Maybe a pump repair, finding a leak, perhaps getting the pool replastered after 15 years. What's the danger in thinking, it's just a repair, it's a small job, I don't really need a formal contract?
Yeah, that mindset is incredibly dangerous, especially with pools, even for seemingly small jobs.
Why is that?
Well, first, even small pool jobs can run into significant money pretty quickly. A new pump isn't cheap. Replastering is a major undertaking. Leak detection can involve digging. Second, there's always a risk of damage to your existing pool structure, your plumbing, your deck, your property during the repair. And third, there are safety implications, especially with electrical and plumbing work.
Okay, so if you skip the contract for that small job, what happens then?
Then you have zero documented agreement on anything. What exactly were they supposed to fix? What was the agreed upon price? What happens if the repair fails a month later? What if they crack a pipe or damage your deck while doing the work?
Right, you've got nothing to fall back on.
Exactly. If the final bill comes in way higher than the verbal quote or the problem isn't actually fixed, you have almost no leverage, no real recourse. It leaves you completely exposed.
So the takeaway is, even for a repair,
get something in writing. Even a simple work order or agreement that outlines the scope of the repair, the price, maybe basic payment terms, and any warranty on the repair itself. It provides crucial clarity and protection for both sides. Don't rely on a handshake, even for repairs.
That's a really vital reminder. A contract isn't just for the massive initial build. Okay, so let's fast forward. You've done the hard work, you've read the contract line by line, asked all the tough questions, negotiated, and finally you've signed on the dotted line. The journey isn't over.
Not at all. Signing is just the start of the construction phase.
So what's the key to staying organized during the build? It can be chaotic.
The absolute best advice is to create a simple system to track everything. Seriously, get a folder or a binder.
Okay, what goes in the binder?
Note down all the key dates from the contract. Payment due dates are obvious, but also dates when you need to make decisions like selecting your tile or coping by a certain deadline. Note any inspection milestones mentioned in the contract or just required by your local building code.
Good idea.
And keep copies of absolutely every single communication, every email, every text message, and especially, critically, any written and signed change orders for modifications to the plan.
Don't rely on memory.
Never. Keep it all together in one physical or digital file. The original quotes, the final contract, all invoices, proofs of payment like canceled checks or credit card statements. Staying organized like this prevents you from missing crucial deadlines or losing documentation you might need later.
Okay, organization is key during the process.
Right.
Now, as the project starts winding down, what separates the homeowners who have a smooth finish from those who end up with lingering issues or payment disputes?
It really comes down to diligent follow-through on the final steps.
Okay, like what specifically?
The organized, successful homeowners proactively ensure all necessary inspections happen and pass. Electrical, plumbing, gas line if there's a heater, final code compliance inspections from the city or county. Don't just assume the contractor is handling it all. Verify. They also request and file all the crucial documentation as work is completed and especially as payments are made. This is super important. You want things like lay-in waivers.
Lane-in waivers, what are those again?
They're documents proving that the main contractor has paid their subcontractors, like the excavation crew, the electricians, the plumbers, the decking guys. If the main contractor doesn't pay them, those subs could potentially put a legal claim, a lay-in, on your house to get paid.
Whoa, okay, so you need proof they've been paid.
Yes. You need lay-in waivers from the main contractor and ideally from the major subcontractors too before you make final payments. You also need to collect all the warranty documents for the installed equipment, pump, filter, heater, lights, and copies of all the permits pulled for the job.
Got it. Paperwork matters.
Hugely. And finally, the diligent homeowner follows the contract's process for the final walkthrough and punch list. They inspect everything carefully, list any minor items that need fixing or finishing the punch list, and ensure those are completed satisfactorily before releasing that final payment.
So that final payment isn't just a formality, it's your leverage, isn't it?
It's your main leverage. Releasing that final chunk of money before every single thing on the punch list is done, before all equipment is working perfectly, and before you have all your paperwork in hand is a very common mistake. It leaves you with very little power to get those last few details corrected if something pops up later.
Hold on to that final payment until you are 100% satisfied and have the documents.
That's the strategy.
This has been incredibly insightful. I mean, it's just abundantly clear now that for a project this big, this complex, this expensive, like a pool, the contract isn't just some legal formality you skim.
Not at all.
It's your roadmap. It's your shield. It's arguably the most important tool you have for protecting that huge investment and making sure the project actually turns out the way you dreamed.
Absolutely. If there's one core message to take away from our deep dive into this source material, it's this. Do not sign that pool contract until you have truly read it line by line, understood it, and asked questions about every single section you're unsure of. That time you invest upfront reading and clarifying. That is your absolute best defense against headaches, against unexpected costs, against disputes down the road.
That is excellent advice. And hopefully this deep dive helps empower you, the listener, to approach your potential pool project with real confidence, to turn what could feel overwhelming into, hopefully, a successful and really joyful investment in your home and your future happiness.
That's absolutely the goal. Give you the tools to navigate it successfully.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. If you really start to view that contract, not just as a boring legal document, but as the actual blueprint for your future peace of mind around this huge project, how might truly understanding every part of it change the whole experience? Not just preventing problems, but maybe even enhancing the sheer joy and relaxation you get from that finished pool for years and years to come.
Interesting way to frame it. Understanding brings confidence. Confidence brings enjoyment.
Something to think